Welcome back and ting and ting and ting. I'm Mr. Giant and I'm back with some more vibes for you. And we're continuing the series on the Crusade. This one is called Battle. I've started this dumb Caribbean there for a minute. Battle of Nicopolis, 1396 Hungarian Crusade. Oh, there was a Hungarian Crusade. Interesting. It'll be interesting to see what's going on here and things. Let me tell you something, man. Thank you all for watching these videos with me, and thank you so much for the comments, and also thank you for the suggestions of things to watch. I have an email address in the description if you want to send me more suggestions to that email address. That will help me out a lot. That way I could get people's names and I could shout them out for sending me the suggestions, you know what I mean, on here. So that's something I want to start doing, thanking people, you know what I mean, because without you guys sending those suggestions, I wouldn't be watching a whole lot of stuff. But thank you all, man. I really like doing this, I have to admit it, you know what I mean. Hopefully in the near future I'm going to start traveling to some of these historic places and giving you all this video of it and speak about it while I'm there myself, you know what I mean, and things. But anyway, let me get you all going on to this video here. We could check this out and see what's going on. Let's YouTube and simmer.
In our previous video, we covered the Battle of Kosovo in 1389 between the Ottoman Empire and a broad alliance of the Balkan peoples led by Serbia. It was the first real test the Ottomans faced in Europe, and despite the loss of their Sultan and heavy casualties, their invasion of Europe continued. But the new conquerors would be confronted by an even bigger challenge during one of the last Crusades, just 7 years later at Nicopolis. Although the Ottomans suffered significant losses at Kosovo, they had enough resources to go on with their military campaigns. The new Sultan, Bayezid I, married the daughter of the Prince of Moravian Serbia, Lazar, who died during the battle, and his son Stefan became the vassal of the Ottomans. At the same time, Stefan was recognized as the leader of Serbia and granted autonomy. With most of the Central Balkans firmly under his control, the Sultan attempted to conquer the southeast of Anatolia and moved his forces there. Wallachian Prince Merkia the Elder and the King of Hungary Sigismund I used them.
Okay, what I'm noticing that a lot of the Crusades was centered pretty much around Europe there, Serbia, now Hungary, Kosovo. Man, all these, 1396. There's been conflict in that region forever. That's just crazy. And a lot of people these days just seeing the modern day conflicts and they don't understand that this thing's been going on for centuries, you know what I mean? And it seems like people are really good at maintaining those conflicts in their mind, because a real true historian could come along and say, well, remember when your people did this to my people, but leaving out certain parts of the story to make the people be more nationalistic, patriotic, whatever you want to call it, But this stuff has been going on forever, man. That's just crazy. And I mean, of course, there's different reasons why they're fighting, but still, it's still broken up in those same factions, pretty much. And that's just nuts, man. It's just a repeating of history, but with the political climate taken into consideration at the time of when the conflicts are. Like the political climate is probably different here than it was back then, So the conflict was the same group, but for a different reason. Or the government used a different motivational tool to get people to start fighting. That's just interesting there.
To capture the strategically important Nicopolis, situated on the banks of the Danube River in 1390.
Oh, real quick. Religion seemed to be at the center of everything, then and now to a certain degree. That's the power of it, man. It's something else.
And also restored a Bulgarian princedom in Tarnovo. However, Bayezid gained a quick victory in his war against Turkish beyliks, and in 1393 took back the majority of the lost lands and even started conducting raids into Wallachia. Nicopolis was recaptured shortly after. Despite the fact that Mercia scored a victory against Bayezid in 1395 at Ravenna, it was clear to the Hungarian king that he would need additional forces to stop the Ottoman incursion, and he called for a crusade. The Hundred Years' War between France and England had already been raging for decades, and many of their neighbours were also involved. There was also the problem of the schism in the Catholic Church, which now had two popes, and the grudge between the Catholic and Orthodox churches, where the sack of Constantinople was still a point of contention. Still, as France and England had signed a truce a few years before, Sigismund found many allies. Both popes supported the crusade, alongside the kings of England and France, and the biggest feudal lord of France, the Duke of Burgundy, Philippe. Burgundians, who formed the core of the crusading army, would be nominally led by the young son of the Duke, the Count of Nevers, Jean. Philippe also had some seasoned commanders to balance his son's inexperience. Knights Hospitaller, Venetian and Genoan navies, and smaller groups of knights from England, Aragon, Poland, Bohemia, the Holy Roman Empire, and the Teutonic Order also agreed to join. The majority of the Crusader army arrived at the city of Regensburg in April of 1396 to use the Danube River to travel downstream to Budapest. In July, they reached the Hungarian capital, where Sigismund joined them. A secondary group, consisting of Hospitaller, Venetian and Genoan navies, converged in Rhodos, entered the Black Sea, and moved into the Danube and upstream. In September, the Crusaders entered Bulgaria and reached the city of Vidin. The ruler was a vassal of the Sultan, but upon the arrival of the crusading army...
You know, while I'm watching this and I'm hearing all the names of these places, like, Budapest, Hungary, Serbia, I wonder how many of those places were the original landing places of where those people call that area. Because over the years people migrate here and there for whatever reason, so to have it been switched to a place where the majority of that population went to settle, you know what I mean? I'm gonna have to look for something like that to see how things shift like that. Geographically, names and stuff will change and all of that to suit whatever region they're living in at the time. Because that has to happen. Because when you think about it, when the people come to the New World, they just give a lot of the places here names from the Old World. But it doesn't necessarily mean that that tribe or ethnic group of people live in that area. Or maybe it just got diluted over time, you know what I mean? But that's just an interesting thought there.
Army, he opened the gates and allowed them to massacre the small Ottoman garrison. The army then moved against Oyahovo. The local population and garrison tried to surrender to Sigismund, who accepted the offer, but the Crusaders didn't honor the agreement. Hundreds of Muslim and Orthodox citizens were killed, and at least a few thousand were made prisoners. On the 8th of September, the Hospitaller-led fleet reached Nicopolis, and 2 days later, the Crusaders started the siege. As the fortifications were recently improved, and the Crusaders lacked adequate siege equipment, they chose to blockade the city in the hope that this would force Bayezid to attack them. Many legends claim that the Ottoman Sultan learned about the Crusader movement due to the betrayal of one of the European leaders. But, in any case, Bayezid's army was besieging Constantinople when the Hospitaller navy crossed the Dardanelles, and that was the moment he lifted the siege and started moving to the north. The Sultan sent a message to his main vassal and relative, Stefan Lazarevich, to move towards Bulgaria at once. By the 24th of September, Bayezid and Stefan Lazarevich were in the vicinity of Nicopolis. Contemporary sources offer varying and at times fantastic numbers of troops, with some claims being in the hundreds of thousands. However, modern historiography is much more modest. On the one hand, Sigismund probably used only a portion of his forces, and the core of the Crusader army was from France. Other European contingents were much smaller than the Burgundian one. Taking all of this into account, 20,000 to 25,000 troops seems to be an absolute maximum for the Crusaders. On the other side, the Ottomans lost a large number of their warriors at Kosovo less than a decade before Nicopolis, and Bayezid probably had at least some of his forces in Anatolia, as the situation there also wasn't stable. So even with the support of his Balkan vassals, he probably had numbers similar to those of the Crusaders.
It's a lot of manpower.
I see your courage, and I will demonstrate courage no less than yours. Behold, I will be like lightning during the battle. It is said that on the 24th of September, the Crusader forces were able to ambush a small group of enemy scouts and destroy it, which only made them more confident. They also executed the prisoners taken at the beginning of the war. There was no unity in their camp, and when Sigismund, who had more experience fighting Ottomans, offered a plan to use infantry for the initial attack, young French knights led by Jean protested, as they were sure that the king wanted to claim an easy victory. Sigismund failed to persuade the Frenchmen, and implored them to attack slowly so his own troops could provide support. Regardless, on the 25th, the Burgundian Crusaders didn't wait and galloped into the attack. Bayezid placed his archers in the center on the slope of a hill, with Akinji riders in front of them, in the hopes that his light cavalry would be able to provoke the Crusaders to move against the archers, who were also defended by stakes. Anatolian Sepahis were on the left, while Balkan Sepahis were on the right. In the second line, the Sultan had his Janissary Guard, the remainder of the Sepahi forces, and the Serbian cavalry of Stefan. The Burgundians saw the Akinjis and attacked what they thought was the main Ottoman force. However, the latter were much quicker and started drawing the Crusaders towards the center while sending arrows their way. The Akinjis managed to evade the heavy cavalry charge and retreat to the flanks, while the Crusaders continued uphill, where they were met with another volley of missiles. Although the knights were in heavy panoply that arrows failed to penetrate, their horses were wounded and killed. It is said that at this point half of the Burgundians either lost their steeds or dismounted to remove the stakes. As this barricade was destroyed, the Crusaders attacked the Ottoman archers, who had almost no armor and very light melee weapons, so soon after, the archers were routed and started retreating uphill. At this point, a smaller group of Sepahis moved to attack the Crusaders head-on, but withdrew shortly after the contact. Younger Crusaders were celebrating the victory, and didn't listen to their more experienced counterparts, who advised to rest and wait for the remainder of the army. Jean and others were sure that they had won the day, and just needed to pursue the Sultan in his retreat. So, they continued moving uphill, and at this point were attacked by the Sepahis from the flanks, and Bayezid and his guard from the front. The knights were now surrounded, and formed a circle to defend themselves. This moment of the battle has multiple retellings, and we present the one supported by the majority of our sources. Burgundian forces were slowly melting away, and Sigismund, who had just reached the slope of the hill, tried to move and break the encirclement. However, his troops were attacked by the Akinjis and archers who retreated at the very beginning of the battle. And now the whole Crusader army was surrounded.
One mistake, and they got surrounded. Wow, that's crazy. Well, it was a mistake because they said because of the enthusiasm of the young folks, and they wanted to run in there, and just finish it off. It's just one mistake, man. Surrounded.
Wallachian and Transylvanian units managed to break the encirclement, but then they retreated as their leader decided it was more prudent to save their troops. Still, this gave Sigismund some room, and he almost managed to turn the battle around. Unfortunately for him, Bayezid had one more fresh unit. Serbian knights commanded by Stefan were ordered forward to attack the left flank of the Crusader army. That caused a mass rout, and as Burgundian forces were either killed or taken prisoner, nothing was stopping the Sultan from using his lighter cavalry in pursuit of the enemy. Most of the Crusader army was destroyed. Ottoman sources claim that Bayezid was furious that the Crusaders murdered their hostages, and that for the first time in Ottoman history, the Sultan gave the order to kill his prisoners. At least a few thousand Crusaders were executed. The remainder were enslaved, and only a handful of noblemen were able to buy their freedom by paying a ransom. Thus ended one of the last Crusades. Seemingly no one was left to stop Bayezid's invasion of Central Europe, but soon he would face a threat from the east. Thanks for watching our documentary.
Man, isn't it like the rich? Poor man in there, he's captured, getting executed, sold into slavery. The rich man pays his way out. And people still go to war fighting for them rich men and them, you know what I mean? They don't buy their way out. They gonna buy their way out. But, that's crazy, ain't it? Anyway, man, thank you all for watching this with me. And like I said, thank you for the comments and everything, you know what I mean? I really enjoy reading your comments. Once again, I want to say, any suggestions you have, there's an email in the description. Send it there, that way I can see your name, and I'll give you a shout out, you know what I mean? Whenever I play a video that you suggested to me, I'll give you a little shout out and thing, you know what I mean? You all take care of each other, alright? Cool runnings.